Meeting on the 8th of August. Welcome to members of the subcommittee and to members of the public who have come along here to listen and or to speak. I would now like to ask Councillor Warwick to read the council blessing, please.
Ia mātou e wiri ana, i ngā taki ki mua o mātou aro, e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau, mahara, haupai, mō ngā hāpori I mahi nei mātou, me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua. Oh, I need to put my glasses on. Kia tō teke tā mātou mahi, mā te maia, te tiro whakamau me te hirihiri, ka taia e arahi I roto e te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warwick. We'll now move on to item 4, which are item 3, which are apologies. I have received 2 apologies. One is from the Mayor, and the other one is from Michael Moore. Are there any other apologies for today's meeting? And there's also Kim Tahiwi, and we have Glenn online, Glenn Cooper online. Any other apologies?
Hi, I'm here.
Yes, thank you, Glenn. So I'll move those apologies, all those in favour for the 3 apologies. Have a seconder for that, please. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Motion is carried. Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. So as you are all aware, we have a number of grants that we are going to be considering today, and I'd just like to read out the assessor's declaration, which you will have seen online. It says, this is about perceived conflicts of interest and conflicts of interest. There is a potential for a perceived conflict of interest when a climate action grant application is made by a family member, friend or associate of a community member or by an organisation associated with a member. So can I ask if there are any declarations of interest for any items on the agenda, please? Yes, Councillor Hanford.
So I will declare that I'm a member of Kapiti Cycling Action, and so if there is or isn't a specific recommendation following on from the debate, I will also remove myself from making any comment specifically pertaining to their application. But if there does turn out to be a recommendation on the table, I will step back from voting on that as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanford. Any other declarations of interest? Thank you. So now we'll move on to members' business. I have had, so first of all, we have a leave of absence. Are any members of this committee wishing to apply for a leave of absence? Thank you. And matters of an urgent nature, I have had none brought to my attention for this meeting, so there are no matters of an urgent nature. So now we'll move on to reports and updates. Oh yes, sorry. Going back to item 5, we'll go on to public speaking time for items that are on the agenda. So we have two groups speaking today. First, I would like to invite members of the Kapiti Cycling Action group to come and speak to us. So there are 2 members speaking, so you have 5 minutes, and at the end of that, members of the committee are able to ask questions of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Lynn Sleeth, Secretary, Kapiti Cycling Action. I'm joined today by Richard Young, who is a local Ramity engineer, and if we're successful with our funding, we would appoint him as our project manager for this project. We're seeking you consider, but set aside, apropos agenda item 8.1, the staff recommendation not to provide the $16,500 outstanding funding to allow the Ramity bike bus project to proceed in 2023. The bike bus scheme is to plan, train, equip and establish several escorted cycle rides to and from 3 primary schools in the Ramity area. it has the full support of the 3 local schools, as well as training providers and suppliers who are offering to assist its establishment. Unlike other projects that council staff recommend not to proceed, the Ramity Bike Bus Initiative fully addresses all of the 5 key council objectives of the Climate Action Fund, and I'm not going to read those out. This project was well supported both at the Ramity Community Board, who allocated my group $2,500 funding, and through a subsequent council motion requesting council staff to offer assistance to establish the scheme. And we suspect there may have been some sort of misunderstanding at that point. The only reason for its exclusion for funding consideration appears to be a suggestion that rather than progress this initiative through Kapiti Cycling now, it should instead be parked and added to the 2024 long-term plan. And if then funded, it will be rolled out at some time between 24 and 27. Kapiti Cycling Action sought funds to rapidly develop and deliver this initiative now. Whilst the assistance of council staff is welcome, there has been no discussion and certainly no agreement with us about deferring this important project or awaiting possible funds from the council's long-term plan. Part of our submission included providing council with results of this initial pilot project for use in future similar projects in this district. It may be that a wider rollout of this may form part of the long-term plan, but please don't delay this initial project by placing unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles and delays in our way. We are ready to complete the Ramity Bike Bus project this year. We have some limited funding together with substantial public support through our media stories in Kapiti News. The 3 schools involved are all on board, and we have identified potential routes and a detailed methodology in our submission. Some $19,000 of the 2023 budget allocation for this council's climate change fund remains unallocated, more than enough to fully fund this initiative. We are therefore seeking the $16.5 thousand to fund the Ramity Bike Bus from the unallocated climate change fund. It will be a tragedy if this opportunity to do something worthwhile for our young students and the climate became lost in well-meaning bureaucracy. You have the money available within the Climate Change Fund, so please let us proceed. I therefore urge councillors to reconsider and reject the staff recommendation to decline our funding application. Thank you.
So, Mr. Young, did you wish to speak to this?
No, I'm really here to answer any questions that may be of assistance, but I think Lynn has covered that. I'm also a member of the Kapiti Cycle Action Committee as well.
Thank you very much. So do any members of the committee have any questions for either of the 2 members here? Councillor Warwick.
Hey Lynn, do you have any intention, if this is successful, to roll it out through the district? Because it's
Richard can answer that.
Yes, what we've offered to do as part of the deliveries for the Ramity Bike Bash Initiative is to produce a report back into council of lessons learnt and a blueprint that can be rolled out further throughout the district, which is when Lynn said, yeah, that may be appropriate that will get funded through long-term plan, but there will be enough funding in this climate action grant to get the Ramadi one up and running with a report back into council that council can use to expand the project if they so desire.
Thank you. Mr. Black.
Thank you, Richard Lynn. Just wondering, if you had the money allocated to you, what would be the process and how long would it take you to get things up and running?
Look, I won't go through the submission. It's about a 14 and 15-week program, and it's about 6 weeks of full-time effort from myself over that period. It involves obviously liaison with the schools, parents, trainers, council, police, NZTA, sourcing the safety material that we'll need to deliver that. We've got trainers lined up through Greater Wellington and NZTA. They co-fund cycle training, and they've agreed to, at no cost to ourselves or the council, to put on a bespoke bike bus training scheme, which they haven't done up to now, but it's something that they're very keen to assist with. And also, obviously, it takes into account of delivering a report. So I think if it goes through to finance and strategy, which is the end of August, September, October, November, we'll be looking to get this up and running by the end of the year.
Lovely. Thank you.
Mr. Judge.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in and presenting. Can you summarise what some of the other co-benefits would be to the wider community beyond just the school children involved in the bike bus, and how that, if there is evidence from other schemes perhaps to say how this encourages a culture of walking and cycling and not driving everywhere?
Sure. Look, just to briefly paraphrase from the report, obviously the benefits for children is physical health, brain function, improves brain function. There's research to show academic performance goes up if people have an active mode on the way to school. For parents and caregivers, 82% who were surveyed as part of our tour wanted their children to be more active on the way to and from school. So there's also benefits for the parents as well. The environment, obviously fewer car drop-offs, so less traffic on the road, so there's improvement to safety and less pollution through there. And also we're looking to have quite a wide pool of bike marshals beyond parents, so that would include maybe some of our retired people within the village, and other helpers there. May also be high school students that can assist in there, so it becomes quite a community-based activity rather than just reliant on individual parents. Hope that gives. And you asked for examples throughout the world. I've been in touch with a very successful scheme in Galway in the Republic of Ireland. There's also schemes running up in Auckland who I've spoken with and met with, and each group seems to work slightly differently, and what we'd look to do is to customise the best of what we see around the world and make that work in Raumati. Raumati obviously has relatively quiet roads, is relatively flat and relatively compact and dense, so it's an ideal location to do a pilot scheme here.
Thank you, Mr. Olsen.
Yeah.
Questions, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, could you just summarise of the $16,500? What is that going to be spent on, and who, where's it going to be spent? Just a really quick summary. I don't need.
Yeah, look, there is about just around half of it is in professional fees, which obviously to my company to run the project. There's also the purchase of the safety equipment, which is bells, tabards, lights, for up to 70 students to cycle with, and also the printing of material related to consultation, communications with parents, also all the people that are going to be living along the selected routes as well. So it's made up of that. With that initial seed funding, also includes the production of a report into council. From there, we're hoping that it becomes sort of self-sustaining with sponsorship if required, to keep equipment and everything up to date.
Good. Thank you.
Are there no further questions? So I have a couple of questions. So thank you very much for coming along today to speak to your application. So just to clarify what actually went on around the council table. So are you aware that Councillor Warwick and Councillor Hanford actually moved and seconded the recommendation from the Raumati Community Board saying exactly that that council would work with the Kapiti Cycling Action Group as a pilot program, and it can be considered in the 24 to 44 long-term funding. Are you aware of that wording?
Yes, we are aware. We are aware, and when we read that, we interpreted that to mean backup support for a wider rollout of the project. We didn't perceive from the statement that there was any suggestion that our application would be declined.
If I may, also it just sort of follows on, and probably the two members of the Raumati Community Board may be best placed to comment on this. The seed funding that the Raumati Community Board put in place does require to be spent within a 12-month period. Otherwise, we're not allowed to ask for any money for another 3 years. So there is a time of the essence on that spending. However, the 2024 to 2027 long-term plan obviously places any expenditure well beyond that 12 months. So they are mutually incompatible. So I think it's probably best that council just think through what that wording was. My understanding, as Lynn said, was that the The long-term planning seemed to relate to the wider application and the extension of what is currently a pilot program, which is what we're seeking funding for, both through the money already allocated by the Raumati Community Board and the Climate Action Fund application to provide the total to do this piece of work now.
Thank you. So I suppose the only comment I can make to that is that these minutes have been signed off and there were no queries around what was written in those recommendations. So so I have a so if for example no extra funding was provided to this project, so you've got some seed funding from the Raumati Community Board. Obviously, I think you're also a member of the CWB, and whether there's options for funding through there and also support through there as well. So what would happen? Because I see it's very top heavy in terms of admin. And so I'm just wondering whether or not this could actually proceed in some form or other, or how or not, depending on whether any more funding is actually granted today.
Okay, I'm not sure there's very much admin at all. There's an awful lot of professional services in there. The $2,500 has to be spent within 12 months. My recommendation to Cycling Action Kapiti is that it would not be prudent to go down professional services route to do the communications coordination with yourselves, NZTA, police and all those organisations, and not be able to deliver a product. So the recommendation to Cycle Action Kapiti is that $2,500 is actually lodged with the cycle shop in Raumati, and that is used to provide subsidised and discounted safety equipment to students. What that would mean that if the bike bus got funded over the next 3 years, that would all have to be replaced. So obviously the application for long-term funding would need to be increased, and probably also it would need to go through to outside providers as well. So I don't know what the budget would need to be for the long-term plan. That certainly is something that we've not been involved in at all. I hear you say that the minutes were approved. Obviously we weren't party to any of those. There was no discussion with Cycle Action Kapiti about deferring this into the long-term plan. All we saw was the request from the community board and council for staff to assist in the development and deployment of this, and we had no intention of it being deferred and delayed by 12 months to 3 years.
So just one other further question. The money that was allocated from the Raumati Community Board, what was that specifically provided to Kapiti Cycling for?
My understanding was there was no direct stipulations of what it was to be used for. We only found out about it after the close of the meeting, and then the recommendation was to say, look, we can't progress professional services or can't progress the planning and consultation on it. We did at that point offer to return it on the basis that we couldn't deliver a bike bus within that time, and the indication was that perhaps we should be applying for additional funding. And obviously this is a fund that, looking for the 5 key areas, it fully matches all those 5, so it does seem to be a very close fit with what it should be being used for.
Thank you very much. So we have Councillor Warwick who has
I just wanted to make a comment about the CWB. It's just an advisory group. It doesn't give out money to support this kind of thing.
I note that. Thank you, Councillor. So any further questions? Thank you very, very much for coming along today. We'll consider your application along with the others later in the meeting. So now I would like to invite John Whitelaw to come up and speak on behalf of the Waikanae Estuary Care Group. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Madam Chairman, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to come along and speak with you this morning. My intention in being here was not to really address you by way of a pitch or a presentation. It was really to answer any questions or address any concerns that you may have with our application. Having said that, having read the agenda item, I noticed that there were some concerns raised by the committee in respect of our funding application, and perhaps I could address some of those concerns verbally with you now. In terms of value for money, we gave a lot of consideration as to why we would use aluminium as opposed to timber construction. We currently have timber construction, and they're heavy H4 timber frames with posts and essentially fence palings that constitute the benches on which our seed trays and seedlings are placed within our shade house. Regrettably, because of the constant watering that needs to go on in such an environment, plus the normal environmental conditions of being very close to the coast, those tables have deteriorated considerably since we first built them with H4 timber 5 years ago. In fact, most of them are rotten and would need to be replaced within the next 12 months at the latest. We chose aluminium because it is a green metal, one of the few green metals. In using aluminium, it's fully recyclable, and in fact, it's almost an infinitely recyclable metal. By using recycling as opposed to new smelting, we save the 95% on the energy footprint. And the timber that we have to use has to be treated. And it's treated with chromium copper arsenate, which does eventually leach into the soil. So it's hardly environmentally friendly. But there were also some practical considerations as to why we wanted to use aluminium as opposed to timber. And that is that most of the staff that work in our nursery are over the age of 70, and in fact some are over the age of 80. And as any of you know, that when you are planting seedlings and germinating seed, you need a fairly sterile or as sterile environment as you possibly can to stop contamination either through weed, bacteria, fungal diseases and so on. And timber is not good for that because it harbours moisture even when it is treated. And it is easily in our environment to pick up contaminants from the environment, such as foreign seeds, spores, and so on. And cleaning that is extremely difficult. These tables are very heavy, and the people that we have working in the nursery just physically can't move them. And they get heavier over time because they become waterlogged and extremely heavy. Aluminium was seen as a far more superior product in that it's lighter, it can be easily moved, and can be cleaned on a regular basis. So whilst the cost is in excess of that which would be otherwise applied to a timber structure or timber structures, we believe it's a lot longer term sustainable. The timber that we currently have, as I said, has been used for about 5 years, and it's probably got a maximum shelf life of 6 to 7 years, whereas the aluminium we estimate could last comfortably for the duration of our nursery operations, which is probably another 20 years.
Yeah. So thank you very much, John, for coming to speak to your application. We have some questions from Councillor Coe.
Yes, look, thank you. I just wondered if you have applied to other funders, or have you explored possibilities for other funders for this project?
Not specifically with respect to this particular application. We did talk to a number of businesses that were in the aluminium fabrication business and asked them whether they'd be prepared to sponsor us, either in part or in full for this project. And generally speaking, the response was negative. When we spoke to them, we suggested if they could use recyclable material from either aluminium doors and screens and so on, we'd be quite happy with that. It didn't have to be new material. But again, the response is, well, we don't really have that much scrap, and what we have is probably not going to be suitable or of the right sizing for our specific requirements. We will look at alternative funding arrangements. We do on a regular basis, just for our general operations. We go regularly to the Farrazin Trust, for example. We've had grants from the Mazda Foundation for our operational expenditures. We carry basically no overhead, like we never have any consultancy fees. It's purely for the operations of the group.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can think of, there must be at least 2 or 3 other funders that would potentially consider
Well,
this
we'd
project.
be more than happy to engage in a dialogue with those organisations.
Yeah, I mean, Nico Foundation is one that would probably look at it. I'm on the Kapiti committee for that. And there's other funders who I think would potentially be interested in what you're doing, that have, who fund environmentally focused projects. So
Well, we'll certainly take up looking at and have a discussion with the NICO
Yep.
funding organisation.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So I have a question, just following on Councillor Coe. How many plants do you actually grow every year, and what is your funding source? Are you totally volunteer, a group of volunteers, or do you have a set funding source?
No, we don't have any specific funding source other than the membership fee that we raise through our members, and that's $25 for a family, and we have a little over 120 members at the moment. That's the only fixed source, if you can call it fixed, source of funding that we have. All of our work is volunteer. We get some support through through DOC because we have a memorandum of understanding, and we also get support, not financially, but in work effort from KCDC, particularly on the northern side of the Waikanae River. We planted there this year just under 590 trees, and the groundwork preparation was done by KCDC. But we do all of the planting. We collect all of our own seeds, we germinate all of our own seeds, we put them into sleeves, and then we pot out into PB3 bags. We recycle as much of our materials as we possibly can. We've had local volunteers that have got, well, in particular in Paraparama, a woman who has a bamboo grove at the end of her section, which is a weed for her. So we harvest that bamboo to use for stakes that support our plants. No, we don't have any form of fixed funding. We rely on our own resources, and in fact, it's the contribution made particularly by committee members, but not just by committee members, but our members basically funds our entire organisation. So a lot of it's out of our own pockets at the end of the day.
Thank you very much for coming along today, and as I said, we'll consider your application along with all the others that are before us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Chair. Thank you.
So that is the end of public speaking time. So what I'm going to do is actually just slightly reorder our agenda. So I would like to invite Ninka to come up and speak to item 7.2, which is on the agenda, which is recommendations from the Climate and Environment Subcommittee from the 12th of June. Thank you, Ninka.
Kia ora kata katoa. I'm here to provide really only a very short update. On the 29th of June, there was a report to Council where Council set new targets for its corporate emissions. In that report, there were an added number of recommendations. Those were put forward after the CES meeting on the 15th of June. In the report on the 29th, sort of first feedback on those recommendations was provided in that report in paragraphs 25 to 31. They were part of the discussion and the report on the 29th, but I was asked to go back to this meeting to see if there was any further discussion or questions that you had on that feedback provided to those additional recommendations that were put forward mostly by Mr. Judge on the 15th of June.
Thank you very much. So these words are found on page 8 of our agenda today. So do we have any questions or comments for Ninka?
Yeah, I had a question.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
Just in relation to, are these being actively worked on, in particular 25 and 20 recommendations H I to I.V, 28 to 25, or is this just a noting that someone's noted?
In the paragraphs where I've discussed which is which actions are part of our work program, yes, I can assure you, if it's part of our work program, we're actually working on it. So the decarbonization of the fleet, for example, has been approved in long-term plan 21. So we're in year 3 of adding EVs and chargers and replacing fuel vehicles with EVs, and that we propose to continue that in the long-term plan 2024 as well.
So that's work for only EVs?
No, decarbonization, and also looking at the 2 pool projects where we propose to exchange the fossil fuel heating, gas heating, with heat pumps. That is also in the work program.
Okay. So is that work towards eliminating all fossil gas, or just trying to minimise it?
It is part of the 5 projects that were approved by Council to go towards new reset target for 2032 to reduce our category 1 and 2 emissions, which is direct emissions from fuel and energy, with another 15.5%. So those are the steps we're taking to get there.
Okay. Well, it didn't actually answer my question, but that's fine. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, Councillor Cooper. So now we move on to Mr. Sutton for questions and comments.
Thank you. Just some comments on this with regard to paragraph 25. That gas be phased out of the 2 pools at Otaki and Waikanai, and the 8 other council facilities. Presumably that is all for water heating. There is no indication here that that work would be sped up. So I would like to understand more about that. With regard to paragraph 25, with regard to paragraph 28, that is well understood that the decarbonisation program is underway since 2021. And that's the intention to exchange the majority of light vehicles to EV and continue. The only exception that may have to be made is for vehicles that are used for Council's emergency response. I just question this and like more clarification on this, please. The point says if in case of an emergency there is no power and the response relies on a limited number of generators, charging EVs is not something that can be prioritised. But in the result there is no power, there would be no fuel either, because you need pumps to pump the fuel. So I would just question that logic a little bit, if I may. And then also with paragraphs 26 and 27.
If I can just comment, I think the numbering of the paragraphs is slightly wrong.
Somewhat confusing.
Yeah, so it goes, so the 20...
I'm just
the
reading
last
as
3.
per the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. So recommendation G, if I may put it that way. And this is with regard to emissions from suppliers. I just again want to emphasise that as a significant purchaser of goods and services in this area, the council has a role as a market shaper. And by not explicitly including a weighting for emissions, but counting it within that 10%, we are actually not helping to shape the market, and indeed we are penalising early adopters who would be able to report on that. I accept the reasoning that we do need more data, but I also accept that we are in a climate emergency and we need to take action, and we do have a role as a market shaper. So I'd just like some, so it's not really a question, or yes, could you please respond to that in terms of how you see the council's role as a market shaper with this approach, because that would tend to disadvantage early adopters of being able to report on their emissions. Thank you.
Yes, so the 10% weighting at the moment is focused on the wider outcomes. That was part of the new procurement policy that was adopted probably 4 years ago. So that's what we've been working with. Environmental outcomes are part of that weighting. It is fully the intention by the time we have more data on indirect emissions, which is a program which is only getting underway now. This has to do with staff capability and capacity we don't have enough people to do everything at once, just like Rome wasn't built in a day. That's just the way it is. We're embarking on that program. And once we have, especially with our larger contractors, they're very good at capturing those data. I don't disagree with you. They have good knowledge. So we're going to tap into that and build it in those contracts. And then when we have a bigger grasp of the effect, then it's more logical to have a weighting discussion, because price and doing something about the reductions of those value chain emissions go together. So it's also an affordability discussion, but that's why we're only starting on that program now, to actually do that good data capture. And in the meantime, it will remain in that 10%, but in each project, it could be a different discussion just as well.
And for paragraphs 25, the phasing out of the gas at the aquatic centres is for the period 24 to 27.
Yes.
It was just, my question was, can that be accelerated, or is there a consideration to accelerate that, given that that is a major source of fossil fuels? And for
Shall I answer that
Yes,
question?
yes, please. Just remind me.
No, so the Otaki Pool project is indeed in the long-term plan 2021, but due to cost escalations, that is still up for debate. As we're moving into a long-term plan, that is where these big funding decisions need to be made by this council. So for me as staff, I can't say I can accelerate it, because it's actually during our big long-term plan funding processes is where those big decisions need to be made in the budget. And then this council can choose to bring that forward. But the target is in 2032. So basically looking at a 10-year target, you have 10 years to put that big reduction in place.
No, thank you. Your answer is very clear, and it's partly my ignorance, because I'm learning how this process works.
It's the funding, 3-year funding cycle that we're depending on.
But it's the role of this committee in recommending more urgent action that I'm trying to get at, which was the basis of those questions. And then paragraph 28, the exception, the possible exception. I just would like to understand why that is there, because it doesn't seem to make logical sense.
I'll ask James Jefferson to.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Look, I understand the logic argument there. I think the learnings, particularly out of the Cyclone Gabriel and the impact on the East Coast, showed that power lines, lifelines goes down, and therefore you don't have access to power. And I think it would be untenable, certainly as the lead controller, that we didn't have some redundancy by way of diesel operational vehicles that can get out and service those communities. And so the pumping, if the power's out, can you pump from a gas station? Yes, you can. We'll have urgent generators that can pump out of the gas stations. Actually, I think many of them, if not all of them, have pumps, but certainly our lifelines, and we've got access to diesel and petrol when we need it. So it's just building that redundancy in if when we do have the big shake and our power goes down, as it most likely will do. So it's just having that redundancy to be able to. But Mr. Mallon might be able to augment my response.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, James. So it isn't just so the emergency management is an issue, and we have fuel bowsers at our operational depots that don't rely on power in terms of diesel supply for those. There's the four-wheel drive capacity issues. There are light vehicles are I think anything under 3 tonnes, which includes utes. So we use utes operationally to tow our mowing equipment around the district. So there are a whole lot of functional operational needs that currently I don't believe can be met by what's available on the market in terms of EVs for that type of functionality at the moment. And people may argue that, yes, you can. There are some of them out there in the market, but in terms of price, reliability, functionality, we don't believe they're at that point in time now. So there was a deadline, I think, that was tied into that recommendation. And as Ninka said, we're working on that decarbonisation, and it may be as those become more reliable and more capable in terms of towing capacity, other elements to them in terms of performance, that we would be looking at replacing those. But what we're saying is now that resolution recommendation as it stood isn't something that we can actively support or implement in the short term.
Thank you. Thank you. Responses, they're very clear. My only point would be to say that this comment doesn't relate to now, it relates to 2025. and building in fuel redundancy is perfectly able to be done with solar. You need a few panels and a battery to be able to recharge. So I would just urge that, given that we are in a climate emergency, that we look at these things with a fresh face. And 2025 is 2 years away, and there will be further developments by then. And I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to Mr. Sutton for his questions, please.
No, that's me.
Comments. Sorry, Simon. Simon, I was looking at you. Yes. Sorry. You're in the hot seat now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dinka. Look, I have a question around the sustainability of EV vehicles and where the fuels, or particularly the batteries, have been sourced, and we don't really have a complete recycling of batteries yet, and we don't know if they're actually better for the environment or not currently. So do we take this into account when we procure vehicles, the cyclic life cycle, the transparency of where things are sourced, and how the batteries are actually recycled, or what do they do after their life expectancy is expired?
The focus of purchasing the EVs has been very focused on our reduction of our emissions. So in a sense, you could say no, because if you took it all into account, you may make a conscious decision to never buy an EV. But this council has targeted and focused emissions reductions. EVs contribute to that, but they shouldn't be treated as the holy grail. And there's lots of discussions on that on LinkedIn, if you follow them. Because yes, there is an end issue with the batteries, but there are also being ways developed at which the batteries can be reused to heat your own house, for example, to generate there and use it for your solar power on your roof. So there are options. But we don't consider all of these at the moment when we purchase one EV a year or two for the decarbonisation.
Thank you. I mean, my general comment and observation here is that what things, things that appear to be clean and green, is we're pushing off to someone else. And I believe we as a council need to do more research in the sourcing and recycling of products before we commit to actually purchasing a line of products which may or may not be helping other parts in the world.
Yes, and we do that with the goods and services that we purchase. It's just for EVs at the moment, you need to try and find national solutions. And I know there is an outfit in Auckland that is refurbishing and reusing car batteries. And they're perfectly usable for a lot of other purposes after they come out of a car. So it does exist. It's just a slow-moving development.
Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend that we actually do a bit more research in regards to battery recycling.
So if I can make some comments. So one of the items on our agenda today is looking at our climate and resilience think tank, and I think that's a really good opportunity today to discuss some of these matters that have been raised around this table today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Judge, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You intimate in the responses that you look at government funding. What specific investigations and applications are in train and have been made for central government funding, such as Crown Lows, to bring the pool projects forward? Is my first question. What applications have been made to ECA to accelerate the electrification of our vehicle fleet, or to provide public charging infrastructure? My third one is, what work have you done on the sourcing of materials and second life options for conventional vehicles?
To the last question, in my time here, none. I know that Jake Roos has done that in the past when we tried to introduce our very first EV, which is probably 9 years ago now. So at the moment, we haven't. You mean in retrofit current cars?
No. If you buy a diesel ute, what work has been done about the mineral extraction to build that ute? And then what happens to that ute after its end of life? Does it just go to landfill?
Usually we replace cars when they need replacing. So they go, I guess, back into the market where all the vehicles go that come out of a council or a business fleet. And no, we have all the research you're talking about, there's simply no capacity in my team to do more of that. So we haven't pursued it.
Mr. Mellon.
I was just going to add to, if there are specific questions you'd like us to answer, then ideally would be good if you could forward them to us so that we could have some time to pull together a response. We're not actively looking at how we can recycle diesel fleet. No, that's not currently part of the work program. I mean, as Nick has provided, what we're providing is a response to these recommendations that were tabled at a previous meeting and taking questions on those resolutions. If you've got other questions, then happy for you to forward them to Ninka offline and we can look to provide you a response. But we're not in a position here today to answer a whole lot of ad hoc questions that don't relate to items necessarily on the agenda in front of you.
And anything on what specific applications or works being done to get Crown funding?
We're at the moment we have funding applications in with the Ministry for Environment, so they're focused on waste and the Zero Waste Hub, and we have received some funding, and there's another application that's just passed the expression of interest. I have discussed with the property manager the CEP funding that is currently available for solar panels, or is it focused on heat pumps? It was quite a narrow category. I think it's about heat exchange. So
ECA funding for...
We do look at the opportunities because we do get forward to them.
So if I can just make a comment here. So I think, this is another really good example of, we're looking at our climate strategy think tank and, that's the sort of information I think we bring to the table there so that we're looking at a long-term strategic vision rather than maybe looking backwards.
No, it's just, Madam Chair, that it was intimated in the report back that officials are looking at sources of Crown funding, and it was a direct question, what are the sources of Crown funding that you're actively looking at? And with regard to energy efficiency, I think, are there, I don't want to answer on your behalf, nor can I, or should I, but are there any specific applications underway or discussions underway prior to an application to ECA for any energy efficiency or electric vehicle funding?
Not for electric vehicle funding at the moment, no.
So nothing for EVs. Is there any applications to accelerate the pool projects?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. No, it's just
over every element of work that's going on at the moment in terms of the council. The pool project is being run through the aquatics team, and the funding for that is not, I don't think, until there's 2 rounds of funding. So again, if you've got those questions, we're happy to go away and provide you a response. And I don't know.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I think we'll leave it there.
Provided a response.
Mr. Judge, if you do have any further questions, please send them to staff. So now we move on to Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a 3 related questions, so if you don't have an answer now, that's okay, but if we could get the information when we can, it'd be interesting. So I'd be interested to know what the average age of the fleet is, what triggers the replacement. So, is it the age of the vehicle, or is it when the wheels fall off when we do it? And in relation to this is, if we have a target to eliminate by January 2026, how much of the fleet would still be in its book life that would need to be replaced, and what would the cost be of replacing vehicles before we plan to?
Is it easy to take those questions offline?
I was just going to mention we have a fleet policy that dictates exactly when we renew and replace fleets and for what reasons. The information I don't have, I don't manage the fleet.
Yeah,
but I can get the answers.
Yeah, if we could get that, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Mr. Mellon.
So there's a replacement policy that sets out the criteria that we use to replace vehicles. With them, we're talking about renewing vehicles, not new vehicles, adding to the fleet. But to go back and find out, I think the question was around average useful life, the residual value of the fleet in 2026. If you're asking for us to do a whole lot of work that we're not currently doing, then we could certainly have a look at it. But again, we'd need to make sure that staff are able to do that. Again, we're happy to provide you the policy and give you an outline then. I didn't think we're actually committing to replace the fleet by 2026.
No, and I wasn't saying that we were, I just was... Yeah, no, I wasn't saying we were. I was just wondering what the impact would be if if there was such a mandate was brought in to do that, what would the impact be as well as interesting to know. Because I think it's important to make a decision to understand, what the impact would be.
If we look at overall emissions reductions, the two pool projects, there are other projects that will make way bigger steps in emissions reductions than replacing all our vehicles with EVs. Yes.
I think Mr. Jefferson would like to make a comment.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to endorse what the chair has said about opportunity to wrestle with some of the finer detail comes through the strategy work that Chris's team will lead with you over the next 14 or 15 months as we draw near to adopting an LTP. Actually, it's less than that's 12 months now, isn't it? Oh my goodness, time's moving on. So I think there we get to be able to respond to what resource we need if you want to do more work in this space, and of course what that will cost. And I can tell you, you will be up for some challenging discussions as part of that LTP process as we balance our priorities. I don't envy your job in striking that balance. The other thing I wanted to endorse, the chair had sent out yesterday the request for questions ahead of the meeting so that we could come better prepared to be able to answer some of those. And I know we're still getting into our operating rhythm, and I just encourage ahead of the next meeting or other meetings that you attend that you flick those questions through in plenty of time for us to be able to enhance the discussion we have here. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. So, Councillor Warwick.
So following on from Simon with regard to the impact of EVs that we is not being talked about worldwide, maybe we should reword the recommendation that we're not only full EVs, or that it should be 28? That only full EVs be added.
So these, if I can just make a comment, so these are recommendations from previous meetings.
Yeah.
And there's no recommendations to this report. This is just for noting.
Okay.
Obviously, in lots of discussion and questions.
Just that maybe there should be recommendations around EVs or something else. And the other thing is, if we're going away from gas for the pools and into power, is there going to be backup solar to support that if there was no power, or is that not part of the plan?
Again, I think, this is getting into some quite detail, and yes, thank you. So I thank you very much for coming along to speak to this, and thank you everyone for your questions, and some of them are very detailed. It shows the interest and the passion that this committee has for our environment and our climate. I just have a couple of comments to make, and that is basically, so we've been talking about sources of alternative energy, and I suppose something that I'd just like to maybe place on the table for a conversation is actually looking at solar power and wind power, whether it's aspirational or whether it's actually real. I've also made the comment that we are looking at our resilience strategy and our climate strategy. So some of the stuff I hope will drop out in that conversation. It's about having a long-term strategy so that we have a good plan moving forward, both short-term and long-term. So thank you very much again for coming along today. It certainly involved a lot of questions. So now we're going to, so now we're going to drop back to our 8.1, which is actually looking at the grants application, the recommendations. So is Rob going to come and speak to that? Thank you. So this is on page 10 of our agenda, and you also would have noted that we have been provided with all the applications on the hub, as well as the assessor's form to fill out or to look at. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Rob Dunn toko ingoa. I'm the council officer who has been coordinating the climate action grant work. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to these climate action grant recommendations. Thank you to the community members who have spoken to their applications. There's a range of considerations around the climate action grants, including how to secure funding through the LTP once central government funding has ended, around continuing to develop the grant policy and criteria. Given it was a new grant this year and there was a limited window of time to promote these, I think it's great that we've received a good number of quality applications from groups who really have the capability to deliver, and really looking forward to continuing to evolve these grants and make them as accessible and relevant to our communities as we can. But the focus of this discussion is very much on the immediate funding recommendations. A brief note around that, the funding recommendations in the report came to a total of around $80,000. It may not have been clear, but this committee can obviously choose to allocate funds differently and has significant leeway to recommend additional funding to bring that total up to $100,000. So otherwise, I'll take the report as read and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Rob. Councillor Coe.
Yes, thank you. Look, this is a bit of a evolutionary process, I guess, because it's something new. But I just wondered whether there needs to be some further clarity around the criteria, because I know the amount of time that's involved in putting funding applications together, especially for voluntary groups. And, if, there's a couple of comments there, we're not going to fund school projects because that's going to lead to a, torrent of school projects. So if we're clearly, if we're not going to fund school projects, then that probably needs to be in the criteria to avoid unnecessary work on the part of applicants. So I would just like to, recommend that we perhaps review those criteria based on the sort of things that have come forward. And I just would like to say that, having heard the applicants this morning, I'd be very keen to see the additional funds, the surplus funds used, and I would like to suggest that we fully fund the cycle project.
Actually, at this point in time, I should have clarified that I'd like to just ask people to ask questions, councillors and members of the to ask questions, please.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. So, okay, I'll leave that till we debate.
Yes, apologies for that.
But, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to Mr. Sutton.
Thank you.
Questions only, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm on. Question only. Natural Build Otaki is a company, as I've understood it. So I question why that was prioritised over community groups and schools, where they are a money-making organisation. So I'd like some clarity around that in terms of the criteria that you're using.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. The Natural Build Otaki, the funding would enable much more accessible workshops for the price point, and given the emissions associated with the building industry, the more people who can be learning about and engaging with alternative building practices, the better, really. So I think if we pan back, possibly one of the issues associated with having broad grant criteria is that it does introduce an element of subjectivity. And I'm sure there'll be different opinions around the prioritisation of these grants from this panel member. And as Councillor Coe mentioned, there's an opportunity going forward to tighten up the criteria to make decision making easier as we go forward.
Thank you. Mr. Judge, questions, please.
Thank you. My question is, do the current criteria allow exclusion based on the source of an application, such as it being a school?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. No, the current criteria specifically include education groups. The recommendations of the panel considered value for money and also considered what would happen if we started funding private and public school projects. Where would that end, and whether council should be funding those applications or whether that funding should be coming from the Ministry of Education. The exception to that is the application from the Raumati Technology Centre, which is actually managed and funded through a charitable trust.
Thank you. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora. Just one quick question. So it's noted that a couple of the projects either don't align particularly well with the grant objectives, like for example the Budge House application, and there's others, as Councillor Coe mentioned in the question this morning, to the Estuary Care Group around potential other funding sources. Is there specific work that has been done or that will be done with applicants who didn't necessarily meet the criteria to understand what their other options might be in terms of developing the proposal that they put in to this for a climate action grant into other potential avenues? Is that something that there's resource to support, specifically the ones that are declined?
We will staff will make suggestions where it's easily known to them, but no, we don't have the capacity to, after they're not successful here, actually take them through a process to see if they can get a grant somewhere else. But we do provide information on our website on where grants can be applied for.
Yeah, okay. That's something we can probably organically help them with through our connections, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I have a question. So on page 15, as it has been pointed out, that not all the money has been allocated. Could you provide some reasoning for that, please?
The reason the money wasn't allocated is that there was, you could say, a late in the piece change, and then we just didn't have the time to reallocate it, and we thought we best leave that to the committee for consideration.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is that you will see on page 10 that there are a number of recommendations before us. So I would like to ask the question, are we happy to take the recommendations as read, or would we like to take a recess so that we can discuss this outside being online?
Why do we need to?
Well, I'm just asking the question.
I think we need to do that in public.
Oh, yes, it will be in public, but it won't be online.
Why not?
Okay, so you would like it to be on public? Does everyone else agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. We will move forward then. So I will now ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommendations as they stand, please.
We've got issues.
Clarification, you're looking to have someone to move and second so that that can be voted on, and then the consequence of that vote can lead to a discussion and the development of other recommendations.
So it's my understanding is that a mover and a seconder, then we can go into
discussion.
Debate.
Okay, I will move them then.
Okay, so Mr. Judge is moving that. Do we have a seconder? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Black. So we will now move into debate. If there are any changes to any recommendations, we will take those. We'll take them all together. We will wait. We will consider them all together rather than taking one recommendation and voting on that, so that we know how the lie of the land's looking. Okay. Right. So, Councillor Coe.
I would like to fully allocate the funding that's available.
Okay.
That's a no-brainer, I think. And I really think that the cycling project would be a great publicity story for our region and as you know, a precursor to what might roll out in the long-term plan. It'd be a good sort of role model example for what communities can do, and so I think, you know, to me that's deserving of being fully funded. And I also think we should support the estuary group with the available leftover funding on the basis that they should be able to apply for additional funding from other sources to provide full funding for their proposed project. Look, I just think, you know, this is an underfunded area. You know, we definitely need to have much greater funding available for these grants going forward in the LTP, because there's huge bang for buck here. You know, these are groups that are actively working to help us achieve our objectives, and you know, we're getting leverage out of it. You know, we give them a small amount of money and they go away and add all their volunteer input to lead to a you know, much bigger outcome than we can afford to pay ourselves. So to me it just makes complete sense to look at increasing the available funding for these grants going forward, but on the basis that we have some really clear, much clearer criteria based on our learnings from the current round. So when we consider the recommendations, that's what I would be looking to recommend, that we fully fund the cycle project, that the remaining funds go to the estuary group, and that we seek to obtain a much higher level of funding through the LTP.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
I support that very much, and I think the cycling action project is really important. I think about 9 or 10 years ago there was a council piece of work done on kids getting to school. It was when Stu Kilmister was around, and there was a lot of stats in there about how many kids don't actively go to school, they get dropped off. And if we can have a pilot that proves it works for bikes, scooters, walking, all active modes, we really do need to get kids out of the car and cars away from schools, because I know up my road going past Wairohu Valley School, there's just cars everywhere. They don't need to be there. So I fully support that, and the care group, because they do amazing work, and yeah, if we had to do it, it would cost us a lot of money. So.
Mr. Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I can't really add much to the sentiments of Liz and Shelley, because I think that's exactly the right thing to do. We need to allocate these funds to groups who are definitely organised and are actually working for our targets. You know, even if we can't get all of our fossil fuel emissions to zero, these groups will help us achieve that. And so one of the instances which occurred last training with the community board is that there was a lot of unallocated funds because the applications weren't clear enough, and there obviously needs to be some assistance out there for people to make the applications clearer for us to actually be able to make better decisions as well. So I'm just wondering if there's any process we can go through to actually allow our communities to make better funding applications and get their heads and thoughts clearer, and so that we can actually, you know, because the ones that we didn't give funding to, you know, they look like they're pretty good projects, and all of them will assist us in actually getting and achieving our goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I just think it's awesome that we've had such great applications and that we've had a large quantity of them, because I know the kind of initial thing when it was put forward how much money we could potentially look to allocate towards this was, are we going to have enough applications to even make it a worthwhile exercise? And so the fact that we took a chance on it and the community's come back and said, no, we're so ready for this and we want to decarbonise our operations, whether we're an organisation, a school, a business, like that's a really positive thing. So it's great that, that we've kind of got so much interest and energised the community through this process. So I'm really excited about that as we head into the district-wide emissions reduction conversation, and it fits in so nicely into the development of our climate change and resilience kind of strategy work. I completely agree that we should put all of the funding to use. I think that it's there, and if it's oversubscribed and then we tell people, oh no, we're just going to push it back, even though we've had enough applications to fully distribute it and use it, and those applications meet the criteria, then we would be crazy not to put it to use. So I won't say which way I think it should be used, because I do have a conflict, but I really acknowledge the sentiment of having it spent in a way that achieves those emissions reduction outcomes, and I really support that, and as well as Councillor Coe, really keen to see us have the conversation through the long-term plan process, which I note that staff will be bringing back to us as a bid, and I really encourage that to be the case. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Councillor Hanford. Mr Sutton.
Thank you, and I support the views of the previous speakers. I would just like to take it a little step further. I do think we should fully fund the Raumati, the Kapiti Cycle Action Project, and I do think we should fully fund the Waikanai Estuary Care Group.
Questions?
So
oh, sorry,
I would like to
we're in
ask.
debate.
I would like to ask. We'll come to a question.
No,
Madam
apologies. Yeah,
I know I do waffle on a bit, but no. But I would like to suggest taking this a little bit further, and there are significant allocations made to projects that perhaps may not have such a big input on the carbon footprint of those businesses. And I think, from the top of my head, replacing a compressor for $15,000 may not have the bang for buck that replanting that growing plants and replanting them on the Waikanai estuary would. So I would just urge that we fully fund those projects and look to any balance that would require $2,000 or $3,000 to be trimmed off some of the allocations in between items 4 and numbers 4 and 9.
Mr Judge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just go back to agreeing with the original person to take a call, Councillor Coe, and what she was said, and also Councillor Hanford in saying what a great scheme and what a wonderful community we have. Also, just picking up on what Mr Sutton just said, the criteria, I think we really should have a very heavy weighting to direct fossil fuel emissions reductions. I do understand from my own background that old air compressor systems can be fantastically inefficient, and replacing them is a good idea in and of itself, but there's just the bang for buck elsewhere is clearly bigger. But I'm not here today to go against the supporting that project, but it wouldn't be at the top of my list, but I'm not going to try and overturn that. So I think we should look at the criteria to give a better weighting to the direct reduction in fossil fuel use, and I would say that the cycling project has a clear impact in that area. And also, just sort of putting up the parallel, just broadening this out a little bit, cycling and schools, and I really want to see that project go ahead. There's a real impact, there's a real crossover with the speed management work, which is not this committee's business. But so I would say that once you've got that going, hopefully we will have some action on speed in Paikakariki. Please bring it to Paikakariki. It might be an opportunity there to really see what you can do when there's a more conducive speed regime to actually encouraging people to walk and cycle. And it's not just for school children, it's for all. And if we can demonstrate that successfully in an area where there's going to be, hopefully, better speed management, then that would be a great case study to take to the rest of the district. So my long-term focus there in advocating for action in Paikakariki is to take that to the rest of the district. So my conclusion is get the money spent and back the cycling project in particular, and then please, when we do look at the criteria, I would really want to see a focus on the direct reduction of fossil fuel use. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. That's the end of debate. So I just want to make a couple of comments. So as you're fully aware, this is a brand new fund. I think it's great that we've had so many applications and that we've got to where we are now. I think there is probably there is the opportunity to have a conversation about maybe tweaking it a bit to to look at a number of things to do with it. But I think ultimately, this has been a good process, and we're going to end up with some great projects that are going to be funded. The other comment that I'd like to make is that, so we've had two speakers come along today. No doubt you've all read the applications in detail, and I haven't heard any other comments about any of the other applications, so I assume that you are all happy with them. Because often when people come to speak, that your mind is focused on them, so I'm just going to leave it there. The other comment that I wanted to make too, in relation to the Kapiti Cycling Action Group, I'm just taking up Mr. Judge's comment, is that I would, if they are funded, I'd really like to see them work along council offices, and because there are a number of streams of work that actually do tie into this area, so that the outcome, these are basically a synergistic outcome here, rather than maybe doing some of these things in isolation, which I'm sure they won't do. So thank you for that. So what I'm going to do now is just Mr. Jefferson is going to provide us with some details about how much money is actually still left, which is unallocated from the applications that have not been funded, and the recommendations from staff.
Yes, so look, just for efficiency purpose, I'm going to suggest, if you are comfortable, that you fully fund the Waikanae Estuary Care Group, and the balance that Ninka will tell me how much is left in that 19,000 would go to Kapiti Cycle Action. That seems to be what I'm picking up. That's fine. That's okay. Yeah, if that's the sense in the room. And then we'll need to move an amendment and go on that. And I am reluctant, Mr. Sutton, to ask staff to start to shave little bits off here and there. But we take absolutely on board your comments around criteria and Mr. Judge's comments too going forward. So does that work for you guys? Yeah. Is it in terms of the process? Yeah. Okay.
So if I could ask Ninka, how much is the how much is the deficit to fully fund both of those applications?
If you choose to fund cycling action in full, then there's $3,200 left for the Waikanae Care Group. So that is slightly short of the 5,000. But
they should be able to pick up a grand somewhere.
So I will, now that we've given that information, I will allow some further debate on that matter, and I'd like to make a comment to start off with. So, so basically, the group has provided us with some funds, or basically a cost of a set of tables. Without the full amount, they can't actually get their tables. So, my view is that they are fully funded, and that the Kapiti Cycling Action Group is their amount is reduced. Pardon? I think there's only one. Anyway, so that's my comment on this. Yeah. So that's my view anyway. So any further debate on this? Mr. Judge.
My view is to fully fund the cycling and give the balance for the tables project.
Mr. Black.
I agree with Christian. Also, I think the Nico Foundation should be explored by the Estuary Care Group.
Okay.
So I'd like to fully fund the BAS. Thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
Yeah, I'll be behind fully funding the Cycling Action Group, because it is the template upon which we want to do around the rest of the district. If it works and we've got the statistics, we can fund this around our other communities, which will be hugely beneficial for health and well-being, as well as carbon reduction. You know, I will give the balance to the Waikanae Key Group.
Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, no, I concur. I think, you know, I'd like to see the cycling fully funded, and I think actually, you know, the Waikanae Street, you know, they could even apply through the community boards. I think they could get a bit from the community boards to make quite a bit of difference as well.
Yeah. So, Councillor Cooper online, do you have anything to, any comments to add to this discussion? No, he doesn't. Sorry,
Yeah, I'm alive now. Yeah, I'm probably swimming against the current a little bit on this one, but happy to go with the feel of the room. But I would just note that the cycling's already received $2,500 from the Remedy Community Board, which is a substantial amount for a community board to give, and they've said that they can they need a minimum of 9,500 to progress. So that would allow them to progress if we did fund the Waikanae estuary. But looks like I'm probably against the flow here. So yep, that's just it for me. Am I still there? Hello.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I've been flicking through my screens and I can't see them now. So thanks anyway. Thanks.
The subcommittee, we're just working on some amended wording. Just bear with.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think an amendment is coming on to the screen, and basically what that is going to say is that this subcommittee recommends to council that the Kapiti Action Cycling Group is fully funded, and the remains of the funds is going to go to the Waikanae Estuary Care Group. Is there a, I'll move that.
It has been moved and seconded, so are the mover and the seconder okay with the amendment?
Yes, this is an amendment. Sorry. Yeah, okay, sorry.
And just in terms of procedure, I think that the subcommittee agreed to allocate all of the unallocated funds would be the first part, and then the second part, fully fund Kapiti Cycle Action, and the balance to go to. Did you get that, Jess?
We're just sorting out the wording, okay? So what would you like us? Sorry, a little bit more wordsmithing. Okay, I think we've got the words up there, so I just want to ask the mover and the seconder whether they're happy with the words that are on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to suggest that we also capture something about the emphasis on fossil fuel reductions when we come to criteria. Is that the place to do this? Okay.
No, it's not. I hear
but
what
for
you're
those
saying, no.
acceptances.
Yes.
And then, okay, can we come back to that in a minute?
Yes, so it's about just the words on the screen there. So as
Yes.
the mover, you're accepting
Yes.
those, and the seconder?
Yes,
So,
I'm happy with those.
Okay. So now I will. All those in favour, say aye. Against? The motion is carried. Oh yes. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Thank you everyone for that. Well done, and thank you council staff very much for going through all the applications, preparing the report that you have done for us, and providing us with the detail of the applications. Thank you very much. So what we'll do now is take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back refreshed to have a think tank conversation. Thank you very much.